anybody who's in a position of leadership has to focus on building people. So if you become so much about building, the work or the tasks, and you got to do this, you got to do that, but you're not building them, then you're not really a leader, because you got nobody that's following you and nobody that's going to that next level.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is your brother Bona Muhammad at another episode of Muslimi Meets. And we have a wonderful guest, Brother Mahmood Qasim, mashallah, who's joined us.
Assalamu alaikum.
How are you doing? And we also have my wonderful co-hosts and co-anchors, Ashley Pearson Khan and Idil Khair, who are joining us for, I think, a very interesting discussion around Islamic leadership. I've always known Mahmood, mashallah, to be a leader. And I don't say that word lightly, because I know that leadership is something that in our community, in our religion, is something that, it holds a very sacred value. We're a community that prays behind one imam, right?
Yeah.
We're a community that, in ideal settings, we would have one leader, right? So there's that notion, it's built into our faith around leadership. And I've always seen you in a leadership capacity. So maybe you could talk to us a little bit about your background, a little bit about, what you're doing right now. I know obviously you're CEO of Islamic Development Relief Foundation. International
Development and
Relief Foundation. Yeah, so right, IDRF.
Right. Yes.
Doing fantastic work around the world. Talk to us a little bit about your capacity and your role as a leader, perhaps in that organization and outside of that.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. This is a really nice surprise here.
We planned this out for months.
Months.
We were in conversation.
I was supposed to have one a while ago, so I apologize.
I was in conversation with your agent. We got everything sorted out.
Oh, okay, no nice. Agents here. No agents here. Right. But I think it's a great discussion. Honestly, for me, it's been a journey with Islamic organizations and working in kind of the non-for-profit space for a long time. But my background is marketing, right. Surprisingly. So I studied marketing, then I did my MBA. Business development was really the focus. 2005 was really where the transition took place for me. Pakistan earthquake. I had just gotten married, been married 1 year. And the wife and I decided, let's go and help out. So when we were there, that's when that transition took place, and I decided this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life and try to help as many people as I can. And in that journey, I learned a lot of things. So, I was exposed to good leaders around the world. I became a very good follower. That was the first step, to follow, have that one person.
That's the number one rule of a good leader, is they're also a good follower.
100%. So, and I learned some amazing things like servant leadership, where you would see people in different leadership positions who are just telling people what to do all the time. And from the prophetic tradition, I also learned that Prophet ﷺ was also a servant leader.
100%.
When you look at the battlefield or when people were struggling, whatever the case may be, he was always stepping forward and helping people from the front, rolling up his sleeves. And a lot of the leaders that I was exposed to early in my life, in my development stages, they had the same sort of mindset. So one who's quite well known, Sheikh Tawfiq Chaudhry.
Yes, very much so.
Very unique style, very, some can and some can't handle it. But one thing I loved about him is that nobody could keep up with him.
Yeah, workaholic. Mashallah.
He was a workaholic.
Yeah, definitely.
And, we would put in time and we thought we were doing amazing, but he was just going above and beyond. He had a great Islamic knowledge. He's a medical doctor. He's running, work in Malaysia and Australia at the same time. And he gave us a lot of great guidance. So seeing that, I realized I would have to work on myself, work on my skills, but at the same time, have that ability to follow someone first and understand why I want to be their follower.
That's right.
And through that, I found, you got to be compassionate. You have to care for others. You can't just get them to do things, but you're not there for them. And with that, alhamdulillah, you build relationships. And now my motto is, you always have to be in the business of relationships. Be there for people. They're there for you. They're going through struggles. You're helping them. You're going through struggles. They're helping you.
Yeah.
So it's not just a work transaction all the time. So alhamdulillah, that's been the journey. Still learning.
Yeah.
Still trying.
No, but mashallah, I'm very impressed. Even from the time that I've known you, I was joking off camera that myself and you were part of the speaker circuit and the conference circuit many, many years ago, many suns and moons ago. A conference in Canada we had called Journey of Faith.
Yeah.
You were my stage manager. I was always on time to work.
Always.
There before every session.
Always
mashallah.
on time.
I put in that hard work, like you're saying, that leadership.
Yeah.
Just kidding. No. I was the worst. I show up late all the time.
Yeah.
But One thing I when I think about the Prophet ﷺ's leadership style, one thing that always impressed me, and I always tell this to people, the Prophet ﷺ recognized people had different skill sets, right? You had someone like Khalid bin Walid, who was a warrior and he was a general.
Yeah.
And you had someone like Hassan ibn Thabit, radiallahu anhu. And the Prophet ﷺ didn't tell, Khalid, be like him, or Hassan, be like him. He acknowledged people's strengths, and he gave them the capacity to do more.
Exactly.
Right? And he brought them together. And I always look at the ummah like that there's so many of us that have so many skill sets.
Yeah.
And if we were to come together and you bring your skills and I bring my skills, I mean, the possibilities are amazing.
100%. I think a great sign of leadership is when someone's able to recognize that don't bring everybody to be the same as you, because then you don't achieve. And I think Prophet ﷺ had a really good insight for this. Khalid ibn Walid, Salman Farsi, and others, Mus'ab ibn Umair, all had different skill sets. Some who embraced Islam and went and did dawah right away, others who were the defenders. But if you look at the Prophet ﷺ, he was a champion of the weak and the oppressed.
Yes.
He was a preserver of the animal kingdom.
Yes.
He took care of the elderly and the weak, women's rights, everything. But in all of these things, he had leadership around him who were also amazing at taking those. Like, he may not have been the best in all of those things, but he was great at inspiring and getting people to act. And that's what motivates me to, whenever I read like leadership books, one of the least recent ones I read, it's an interesting title, but Rockefeller Habits. In there they talk about right people doing the right things right.
Yes.
And if you look at the Prophet ﷺ, he would appoint people in different positions who knew how to do those things right. So, there's a lot of things we can learn from the Prophet's leadership. And every time I read these leadership books, or Simon Sinek and everybody else, you get these nice tidbits, but you're like, wow, subhanAllah, the Prophet ﷺ used to enact, like he used to live this. He used to make sure that, for somebody to be a leader, you got to have followers. And obviously, 1.8 billion followers is a quick testament.
Pretty good numbers, if you ask me.
Pretty good.
Pretty efficient so far.
Pretty efficient so far. Yeah, mashallah.
No, I definitely agree with that. I feel like with leadership comes delegation, right? And compartmentalizing things. And that takes an emotional intelligence to deal with human beings the right way, right? And I think that also comes from a vulnerable place. It's not always this tyrant that's like, I'm going to be a dictator. It comes from the vulnerability that you have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you have with your sujood. Like when you're in a place or a position to help others or to be a leader, you have to actually ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, give me what I need to help these people. So it's not even coming from you. It's coming from, the wisdom that Allah is giving to you. So operating from a place of, generosity and operating from a place of abundance rather than lack, I think that's, a big part of what I'm listening, to you say. I wanted to know, a lot of people learn from you as a leader, let's say, and in the positions that you're in. But what are you learning from your own journey? Because every time you meet someone new, even though maybe they're in a place that they need you, I feel like the more people you meet, the more that you learn about yourself through others, right? So what have you learned?
Definitely. I mean, that's a great question, because I find that, that imposter syndrome is there all the time. It's there all the time. People look up to you and want, your guidance, but you know yourself, and you know the things you have to work on. And it's a learning journey every single day.
That's right.
Like even in this conversation, I'm learning things, and I will walk away learning a lot. So I think having that humility that, you can't know everything, it's impossible. And being that sponge that can absorb and try to learn as much as they can. And having that emotional intelligence that I may be able to help others, but I got to also continue working on myself. So, if the glass is empty, I can't really fill anybody else's glass. So got to have those opportunities to keep learning, developing, and having good people around so you can rejuvenate yourself and work on those things. So I think number one thing is having that humility, not having that ego where you think you know it all. Some of the leaders you see who become great dictators, and sometimes you might need dictators, but not all the time. And I think having that ability to work and be collaborative and giving people ownership, accountability there. So I think it all works out in different stages of different people's lives.
I definitely agree with that.
There's a question that I feel like everybody gets asked at some point if you're talking about leadership. I've been asked this, and I love hearing people's answers, so I have to ask you, do you think that leaders are born or made?
That's a great question. I personally feel leadership can be developed. So, I do a lot of stuff with MBTI, Myers-Briggs. I know there's a lot of controversy, whatever, no problem. But
I like that kind of stuff.
One thing I like about it is that nature and nurture side of things. So I personally believe in fitrah. I mean, we all do, I hope.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
you know, there's things that are in our nature.
Yeah.
So some people may have that confidence to just be out there and talk and engage, and others may not. But you see, I personally feel, at least from what I've read, I feel the Prophet ﷺ had introversion tendencies,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Whatever the label might be. But
Yeah.
at the same time, he was a great leader.
Yes.
People assume for you to be a leader, you have to be outwardly and get out there and speak and engage and not have stage fright and, you know, all these amazing things that people think you automatically just have. But I personally feel people can develop these skills if you really like muscle memory. You know, nobody's a professional basketball player. You
Well,
need 10,000.
speak for yourself.
I mean, actually, yeah, no comment. No
yeah, okay.
comment.
Well,
No
he's the
comment.
only one in the world. He's the only one. That,
Only world in-
yeah.
yeah.
I'm just
Exactly.
injured. That's the only thing. I'm getting better though. Okay, go
You know,
ahead.
for you to be good at any skill,
Yeah.
you work at it, you work at that trade, you become good. I think for anybody to be a leader, first you got to be that follower. You have to be on that learning journey to work on things that will help others.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, I think you can step into leadership.
And as a good leader, eventually you have to let someone else lead as well
I definitely think so.
to
yeah.
have other great
Yeah.
leaders.
Yeah, and one other thing I learned from Sheikh Tawfiq is, you know, we have our differences, but at the same time, I give him a lot of credit. I think he's an amazing human being and has helped me a lot. He used to tell us all the time that anybody who's in a position of leadership has to focus on building people. So if you become so much about building, you know, the work or the tasks, and you got to do this, you got to do that, but you're not building them, then you're not really a leader because you got nobody that's following you and nobody that's going to that next level. And that's prophetic example.
100%.
Like he built people around him who were able to do so much and support him, and I think that's what we all have to aspire towards. So.
I mean, I think that is technically the greatest asset we have is people.
100%. Yeah.
I think a lot of times, even in the community sense, you know, people talk about building. You know, we have masajid.
Yeah.
They spend like, you know, $1 million on a chandelier, and they want to build infrastructure. But very rarely do we find them building the people, building the leadership, building the youth to become the future leaders. And I don't want to talk too badly about the masajid, but I think that's an interesting place for leadership to occur. A lot of times you find people that are, you know, they're kind of on a volunteer basis,
Right.
You know, but collecting money and trying to help the community, but not necessarily, you know, doing it, you know, I don't even know the right word, but they're not doing it with the full ihsan that possibly they could be, right? Because they also got jobs, they got families. What do you find to be some of the flaws in our community's leadership approach? Not to point any specific person out, but what are some of the problems you see in terms of the way that we're, you know, because a lot of people, you know, sometimes they want it for power, they want it for net. What are some of the problems you see in our community?
I think the biggest one is, at least what I notice in North America. I mean, I can't speak for some of the other countries because there's a lot more that can be done there. But I think the biggest thing is really there's too much focus on infrastructure and like building nice buildings, biggest one possible, but not so much on developing the next generation who's going to step forward. So, you know, my personal example, I grew up in a masjid that wasn't really, it was a barn. We used to call it the barn.
Okay.
Al-Falah, you know, I'll put a
I was
name
going
out
to say
there.
Milton. I knew exactly which one.
So,
or Oakville, I should say. Sorry.
exactly. I grew up in Oakville. So
Yeah.
Al-Falah wasn't like the best building or anything like that. But one thing we got right over there was that it gave us the opportunity to come any time of the day, play sports or whatever. Like many of us, you know, back then just wanted to go for basketball, really.
You guys had like a ball court in like a barn?
Yeah.
I remember, I hear about that. MashaAllah.
People used to come from all over the city because they couldn't beat our team. So,
Wow.
yeah. So
You guys are putting in real work in the barn after
yeah,
hours.
in the barn,
absolutely.
exactly.
MashaAllah,
So
that barn ball.
I find now there's amazing masajid, but the youth is not there. It's still the older generation. There's a lot of control.
Yes.
And it's leading by title rather than, you know, people wanting to be there. And because there's some great examples of masjids who've done it right, and there's a lot of youth involved. Other thing is, you know, I've read a lot on social media the women's closets, the prayer spaces. I think that's a huge
Don't even get me started on that.
Yeah,
It's not
major
even a
issue.
walk-in closet. It's like a small closet.
I
You
know.
know what I mean?
closet. Yeah, I saw a whole. I think somebody did like 30 days of Ramadan closets.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
they talked
it's really
about.
bad. Yeah.
I think that's just not right. I think for us as a community, you know, we see from the example so many, you know, who quoted the most ahadith.
Yeah, Aisha.
Aisha, right? So obviously she was exposed to the Prophet ﷺ. She had, obviously she was married to him as well, but she had knowledge of the outside things as well. We are really neglecting like a major component of our community. We're in the West. You know, I still see so many masjids where you don't know where the women's area is. Kids aren't allowed to be there. So it's not about really building the community. It's more about keeping the masjid clean, keeping the place clean.
Like it's about appearance and not quality.
It's no quality. So like our journey wasn't through the study of the religion. They're like, come anytime, use the facility. So we would be there till Fajr playing. Then we started feeling guilty, like maybe we should pray, we should pray at least.
But you see that gave you a healthy attachment to the place.
Exactly.
It's like your second home. A place
Nobody
that you can
forced
come
us.
to. Yeah.
And after Salah, we were like, okay, maybe we can do a little bit of, maybe we should do something, learn a little bit. And sooner than later, alhamdulillah, we got involved in good work and it was good.
That masjid, surprisingly, has produced a lot of du'at, a lot of brothers, mashallah, on the da'wah scene. So
the environment was good.
They did something good there. I don't know what the secret sauce was, but it worked, mashallah.
You know what? Something that's even like something that I realized after what you just said, even the people that grew up in the masjids, like we don't go back. We live our lives and we just, because then we kind of pivot into having our own personal relationship with Allah. We go back during Ramadan, for Taraweeh and things like that, but it's not a home for us anymore. We don't bring our children back to the masjid and like it's not a place that we can come back to. It's just there's so much, around it that's not comfortable, right? And people have life-altering situations. They can't go back to the masjid. There's so much judgment. There's just so much negativity.
Shame,
And I feel like places that are not that beautiful might have, great attachment. So I think that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Good.
What's one piece of advice that you would give to, the upcoming leaders?
There's a lot, but I think, be on a continuous journey of learning. Expose yourself to situations where you're uncomfortable. I think a lot of times we like to be in our comfort zones and be on the path that we're on. I put myself in very uncomfortable situations. Like even taking on this role was not comfortable.
Exactly.
Even you doing this interview was not comfortable.
It was not comfortable, but alhamdulillah, I feel okay now. So, the jitters are gone. I feel better. But I think putting yourself in some of those situations does help. And it gets that adrenaline flowing and, flight and fright. It helps sometimes.
Exactly.
So I think that's my number one advice. And two, have a very good mentor. Because you can't learn alone. You have to have somebody that's always guiding you. I know they call them coaches nowadays, but whatever they call them, just have somebody who's a good religious guide, but also industry guide who can help you.
Wise counsel,
Exactly.
I think that's important. And I don't want to step on your toes, but that's one thing, mentorship in our community. This is something, it's such a lost art. I've had so many mentors growing up. People think that I just arrived. There was so much work that went in behind the scenes with people investing in me. Time, real quality time, taking me places, traveling with me. And I think for younger folks, one thing that I always advise is to be around older people.
Yes.
A lot of times, some young guys or girls, they want to stick in their little circles, with their little friends. But one advice that I always impart upon, and something that I always benefited from, was being around older guys. Even when I was grade 7, grade 8, hang around high school guys, as long as they're the good crowd. There's so much you can learn, right, from older people.
100%.
Even in our age, learning from seniors, learning from elders, people in their 40s, 50s. I know you're already old, mashallah, but I'm still young, so
got a lot of grays happening now.
No, you look good, mashallah. But honestly, this is a great conversation. I'm so thankful that we have leaders like you in our community.
Absolutely.
On behalf of all of us, we just want to thank you for Muslimi and continue to do your great work, mashallah. May Allah grant you tawfiq. And may Allah bless all of you for watching, inshallah. Stay tuned for more content here on Muslimi. Jazakallah khair for watching. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.